My name is Cassidy Turner, and I'm 28 years old. Right now, I'm standing barefoot in 4-degree weather, 7 months pregnant, and there's blood dripping down my legs onto the white snow beneath me. My stepmother Gloria just locked the front door, and through the frosted window, I can see my half-sister Brittany laughing. I've been pounding on this frozen door for 10 minutes, begging them to let me back inside because I'm terrified I'm losing my baby. My lungs burn with every breath of icy air I take. My toes have gone completely numb, and my fingers are turning blue as I beat against the wood one more time. Then I hear it, the low purr of an engine. A black luxury car is pulling into the driveway, and everything is about to change. Before I tell you what happens next, I need to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. And if you want to hear how a locked door in freezing weather became the best thing that ever happened to me, hit that like button and subscribe because this story gets intense. Trust me, you won't believe what my family was actually planning. Now, let me take you back to where this nightmare really began. I grew up believing I was the cherished only child in the Turner family until everything shattered when I turned 12 years old. My mother died from cancer when I was 9, and for 3 years, it was just me and my father Kenneth against the world. He was a wealthy real estate developer who traveled constantly for business, but when he was home, he made me feel like I was his entire universe. We had movie nights every Friday, and he never missed my school plays even if it meant flying back from across the country. I thought that bond was unbreakable, but I was wrong. When I was 12, my father remarried a woman named Gloria, and she brought her daughter Brittany into our home. Brittany was exactly my age, born just 3 months after me, and from the moment we met, I could see the calculation in her eyes. At first, Gloria played the role of the loving stepmother so perfectly that even I believed it. She baked cookies with me, helped me pick out dresses for school dances, and called me her bonus daughter in front of everyone. But behind closed doors, when my father was away on his business trips, subtle cruelties began to emerge, like poison seeping through cracks. She would accidentally spill juice on my homework the night before it was due, then act shocked and apologetic while handing Brittany a new laptop to redo hers. She would forget to wake me up for school but make sure Brittany had a hot breakfast waiting. My belongings would go missing, only to turn up in the trash, and Gloria would suggest I was becoming forgetful and careless. Meanwhile, Brittany got everything she wanted: the bigger bedroom, the nicer clothes, the latest phone, while I was told I needed to be more grateful for what I had. Over the next 6 years, Gloria worked like a master sculptor, slowly reshaping my father's perception of me. She would tell him I was becoming rebellious and difficult, that I resented her for replacing my mother, that I was cruel to Brittany when no one was watching. My father, who was gone more than he was home, started to see me through Gloria's lens instead of his own eyes. By the time I was 18, I had become the problem child in my own home, blamed for everything that went wrong. If Brittany got a bad grade, it was because I had distracted her. If Gloria seemed stressed, it was because I was being ungrateful. If my father's business deals fell through, Gloria would hint that his worry about me was affecting his focus. I felt like I was drowning in quicksand, and every attempt to defend myself only pulled me deeper under. The first major betrayal came during my senior year of high school when I received an acceptance letter from Yale University with a full scholarship. I had worked 3 jobs throughout high school to save money for application fees, studied until 2 in the morning every night, and volunteered at every organization I could find. That acceptance letter was my ticket to freedom, my proof that I was worth something despite what Gloria had made me believe. I ran home with the letter clutched in my shaking hands, so excited to show my father that I had made something of myself. But when I walked through the door, Gloria was waiting with a cold smile. She took the letter from my hands, examined it with narrowed eyes, and then called my father into the room. Before I could even speak, she told him that I had clearly forged the acceptance letter for attention, that Yale would never accept someone with my grades, that this was just another example of my desperate need for validation. My father looked at the letter, looked at me, and I saw doubt cloud his eyes. He refused to pay for any college expenses, even though he had always promised he would. He called me a liar and a manipulator, said I was trying to embarrass the family with my schemes. I tried to show him my transcripts, my recommendation letters, my portfolio of volunteer work, but he waved it all away as more fabrications. Meanwhile, Brittany, who had barely passing grades and spent most of her time posting selfies online, was enrolled in an expensive private university in California. All expenses paid. I watched her drive away in a brand new car my father bought her for graduation, while I stood in the driveway with $37 in my pocket and a rejection from the only parent I had left. I ended up attending community college, working 3 jobs to pay for classes, sleeping 4 hours a night, and slowly losing pieces of myself to exhaustion and hopelessness. That was when I realized my family would never treat me fairly, and I needed to escape. At age 26, after years of clawing my way through school and building a career as an event coordinator, I met Jackson Reeves at a corporate gala I was organizing. He was charming in a way that made my starved heart leap, successful in his expensive suits and confident handshake, and attentive in a way no one had been since my mother died. He brought me coffee during long setup days, remembered small details I mentioned in passing, and made me feel seen for the first time in years. We started dating, and within 4 months, he proposed with a diamond ring and promises of the family I had always wanted. I said yes because I was so desperate to belong somewhere, to someone, that I ignored the small red flags fluttering in the corners of my vision. 3 months into our marriage, I got pregnant, and I thought maybe this was finally my happy ending. I was so catastrophically wrong. Jackson's true colors emerged slowly at first, then all at once, like a dam breaking. It started with small comments about my changing body during pregnancy, jokes about how I was getting fat and unattractive, suggestions that I was lucky he stayed with me when I looked like this. Then came the financial control. He insisted I quit my job as an event coordinator because he wanted his wife to focus on being a mother. And foolishly, I agreed because I thought he was being protective. Without my own income, I became completely dependent on him, and that was exactly what he wanted. He would go out for entire nights without explanation, come home smelling like perfume that wasn't mine, and when I questioned him, he would turn it around and accuse me of being paranoid and hormonal. I felt like I was losing my mind, constantly questioning my own perception of reality because he was so convincing in his lies. The truth revealed itself 6 months into my pregnancy when I found his phone unlocked on the kitchen counter. I wasn't the type to snoop, but something in my gut told me to look, and what I found destroyed the last piece of trust I had in anyone. There were text messages between Jackson and my half-sister Brittany, hundreds of them, going back months before I even got pregnant. They were explicit, filthy, full of inside jokes and plans to meet up. But worse than the sexual content were the messages where they laughed about me. Brittany called me pathetic and desperate. Jackson called me a meal ticket and said I was his backup plan for financial security. They joked about how easy I was to manipulate, how I believed everything they told me, how I was so starved for love that I would accept any scraps of affection thrown my way. I read every single message with tears streaming down my face and my baby kicking inside me, and I felt something inside me break that I knew would never fully heal. When I confronted Jackson that evening, he didn't even have the decency to deny it. He laughed, actually laughed, and said that Brittany was more fun than a pregnant whale like me. He said he had only married me to get access to my father's business connections, and now that Kenneth had cut me off, I was useless to him anyway. He told me I should be grateful he stuck around this long, that no one else would want damaged goods like me. I filed for divorce the next morning, my hands shaking so hard I could barely sign the papers. Jackson's response was to empty our joint bank account, every penny we had saved, leaving me with exactly $37 and a pregnancy entering its 3rd trimester. Then he moved directly into an apartment with Brittany, and I later found out that Gloria had been secretly paying their rent for months. My entire family had been conspiring against me, treating my life like it was a game they were all playing together. With no money, no job, and no home since our apartment was in Jackson's name, I was forced to do the one thing I swore I would never do. I called my father and begged him to let me come home temporarily, just until the baby was born and I could get back on my feet. The silence on the other end of the phone lasted so long I thought he had hung up. Finally, he agreed, but his voice was cold and conditional. He said I could stay in the house, but I would need to earn my keep and prove I wasn't going to cause drama. I agreed because I had no other choice. No friends left after years of isolation. No savings after Jackson's theft. Nowhere else to turn. When I arrived at the Turner house with my single suitcase of belongings, Gloria opened the door with a smile that looked like broken glass, and I knew I had just walked into a trap far worse than my marriage had been. Life in the Turner household was designed to break me. I was given the smallest room in the house, a former storage space barely big enough for a twin bed, with no heat and a window that wouldn't close properly. Despite being 7 months pregnant with complications, I was expected to do all the household chores, cooking 3 meals a day, cleaning 4 bathrooms, doing laundry for everyone, scrubbing floors on my hands and knees while my back screamed in agony. Gloria would inspect my work like a drill sergeant, finding fault with everything, making me redo tasks until they met her impossible standards. She had a particular talent for accidentally bumping into me in doorways, pushing me just hard enough to make me stumble, then expressing loud concern for my clumsiness in front of my father. Brittany would bring Jackson over for family dinners multiple times a week, and they would sit across from me holding hands, feeding each other, kissing in front of me while my father pretended not to notice. My father, Kenneth, had transformed into a stranger I no longer recognized. Gloria had spent years programming him to see me as the villain in every story, and now he looked at me with such disappointment and distrust that it physically hurt. He believed every lie Gloria told him, that I was faking my pregnancy complications for attention, that I had stolen money from Gloria's purse, that I was secretly planning to trap another wealthy man into taking care of me. When I tried to defend myself, he would cut me off and tell me I needed to take responsibility for my choices, instead of playing the victim. He threatened more than once to have me committed to a psychiatric facility if I didn't stop with my accusations and drama. I was living in a nightmare where down was up and black was white, where my abusers were treated as saints and I was the monster for daring to speak the truth. The second major betrayal came from the one person I thought might still be on my side. My childhood friend Maya reached out after years of no contact, saying she had heard about everything I was going through and wanted to help. I was so desperate for an ally that I ignored how convenient her timing was. Maya came over several times when Gloria was out, brought me prenatal vitamins and maternity clothes, listened to me cry about how trapped I felt. I told her everything, including my plan to leave the moment the baby was born, to move to another state and start completely over where my family couldn't find me. Maya recorded every single conversation on her phone and delivered the recordings to Gloria like a cat bringing in a dead bird. Gloria used those recordings to convince Kenneth that I was planning to falsely accuse the family of abuse in order to extort money from them, that I was going to claim they had mistreated me and sue for damages. Kenneth sat me down in his office and told me in a voice colder than I had ever heard that if I tried anything like that, he would use every resource at his disposal to destroy me. He would take my baby away, have me declared mentally incompetent, make sure I never worked in this city again. I realized then that I wasn't just fighting Gloria or Brittany or Jackson. I was fighting all of them, and they held all the cards. The night everything fell apart started like any other nightmare in that house. It was mid-December, and the temperature had been dropping steadily all week until it hit 4 degrees with a wind chill that made it feel even colder. Kenneth was hosting an important business dinner with potential investors, some Silicon Valley types who could make or break his latest development project, and Gloria insisted that I serve the meal to earn my keep in the household. I was 7 months pregnant, exhausted to the point where I could barely stand, and experiencing Braxton Hicks contractions that made me double over in pain every few minutes. But when I tried to tell Gloria I wasn't feeling well, she smiled that cruel smile and said that if I couldn't handle simple tasks, maybe I needed to find somewhere else to live in my condition. The threat was clear, so I put on the black dress she had laid out for me, tied on an apron, and prepared to play the role of grateful stepdaughter for an audience of strangers. Brittany and Jackson arrived as guests, because apparently torturing me privately wasn't enough entertainment for them anymore. They walked in holding hands, Brittany wearing a dress cut so low and tight it left nothing to the imagination. Jackson in a designer suit that I knew I had paid for with my credit card before he destroyed my finances. They greeted my father warmly, kissed Gloria on both cheeks, and then looked at me like I was part of the furniture, something beneath their notice. The investors arrived shortly after, 3 men in expensive suits who barely glanced at me as I poured their wine and set down plates of food Gloria had prepared. I was a ghost in my own father's house, invisible until I made a mistake, and then I would become the only thing anyone could see. The mistake happened 20 minutes into dinner. My hands had been shaking all evening from stress and pain, my body rebelling against the demands I was placing on it. And as I reached across the table to refill an investor's water glass, my fingers lost their grip. The glass tilted, water splashed across the white tablecloth, and time seemed to slow down as I watched the liquid spread toward the investor's laptop sitting open beside his plate. I managed to grab the laptop before it got wet, but the damage to the evening was already done. Gloria's scream could have shattered crystal. She leapt to her feet, face red with manufactured rage, and accused me of deliberately trying to ruin Kenneth's business deal. She claimed I was jealous of the family's success, that I had always been a saboteur, that I couldn't stand to see anyone else happy when my own life was such a disaster. Before I could defend myself, Brittany jumped in with her own accusation. She clutched her wrist dramatically and announced that I had also tried to steal her diamond bracelet earlier in the evening, that she had caught me going through her purse in the bathroom. It was a complete fabrication, an obvious lie, but Jackson backed her up immediately. He told the investors that I had always been unstable and jealous of Brittany, that I had a history of stealing and lying, that the entire family had been trying to help me but I refused to change my destructive behavior. The investors looked uncomfortable, exchanging glances, probably wishing they were anywhere else but in the middle of this family drama. My father's face turned purple with rage, veins bulging in his neck, and he said something I will never forget. He called me an embarrassment to the Turner name, said I had been nothing but problems since the day my mother died, told me I had ruined the most important business dinner of his career with my incompetence and malice. Something inside me snapped in that moment. For years, I had absorbed their abuse, accepted their lies, blamed myself for their cruelty. But standing there pregnant and exhausted, watching them spin their web of deceit in front of strangers, I couldn't stay silent anymore. I spoke up for the first time in years with a voice that surprised even me with its strength. I told everyone at that table the truth about Gloria's abuse, about how she had systematically destroyed my relationship with my father through years of manipulation. I talked about Brittany's affair with my husband, about how they had conspired to break me. I even pulled out my phone and showed the investors the text messages I had saved between Jackson and Brittany, the ones where they laughed about using me and planning their betrayal. I had evidence, screenshots, documentation of everything they had done to me, and I laid it all out on that dinner table like cards in a poker game where I had finally called their bluff. Gloria's mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw genuine fury flash across her face, the kind of rage that comes from being exposed after years of careful deception. But she recovered quickly, her expression shifting to one of concern and sadness. And she told the investors that I was clearly having some sort of mental breakdown, that the pregnancy hormones had made me delusional, that the family had been trying to get me psychiatric help, but I refused treatment. The investors looked between us, uncertain who to believe, and I could see them mentally calculating how to extract themselves from this situation as quickly as possible. My father sat frozen in his chair, his face unreadable, and I couldn't tell if any part of him believed me or if Gloria's programming was too complete to break. That's when I felt it. A warm wetness spreading down my legs, and at first I thought my water had broken, but when I looked down, I saw red instead of clear. Blood was seeping through my dress, running down my thighs, dripping onto the expensive carpet beneath my feet. The pain hit me like a freight train, sharp and stabbing, radiating from my abdomen through my entire body. I gasped and grabbed my stomach, feeling my baby moving frantically inside me, and I knew with absolute certainty that something was terribly wrong. I looked at my father, then at Gloria, and I said the words I never thought I would have to say. I begged them to call an ambulance because I was losing my baby. Gloria's response was not what any normal human being would do. Instead of concern, instead of calling for help, she laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, and then she turned to the investors and my father and told them I was faking a medical emergency for attention. She said I was putting on a show because I couldn't stand not being the center of attention, that I was trying to manipulate them with fake blood and dramatic acting. Brittany actually giggled and said I was really committed to the performance. The investors looked horrified now, clearly wanting to leave but not knowing how to excuse themselves politely. Kenneth stared at the blood pooling around my feet, and I saw him waver, saw doubt cross his face. But then Gloria put her hand on his arm and whispered something in his ear. His expression hardened, and he told me I was being dramatic and needed to stop this ridiculous display immediately. I begged him to let me call an ambulance, my voice breaking with pain and terror. My baby had stopped moving as much, and that scared me more than the blood or the pain or anything else. But Kenneth refused, said if I wanted to see a doctor I could drive myself in the morning, that he wasn't going to let me ruin his business dinner with my theatrics. The investors finally made their excuses and left, practically running out the door, and I knew that business deal was dead. That made everything worse because now Kenneth blamed me for the loss of millions of dollars, and his eyes when he looked at me held nothing but contempt. Gloria didn't waste any time. She grabbed my arm with fingers like steel clamps, nails digging into my skin hard enough to bruise, and she physically dragged me toward the front door. I was weak from blood loss, barely able to stand, my legs trembling beneath me as I tried to resist. I begged her to stop, told her I needed help, pleaded with my father to intervene, but Kenneth had already turned back to the dining room, dismissing the entire situation as more of my drama. Brittany held the door open with a smile on her face, and Jackson raised his wine glass in a mock toast from his seat at the table. Gloria shoved me outside onto the front step, and I stumbled, falling to my knees on the frozen concrete. The last thing I heard before the door slammed shut was Brittany's laughter, high and cruel, echoing through the night air. The lock clicked into place with a sound of absolute finality. I pulled myself to my feet and pounded on the door with fists that quickly went numb from the cold. I was wearing only a thin cocktail dress and no shoes, my feet bare against snow and ice that burned like fire against my skin. The temperature was 4 degrees, and the wind cut through my dress like knives, stealing the heat from my body with every gust. Blood continued to run down my legs, leaving red trails in the white snow, and I could feel my baby's movements getting weaker and weaker inside me. I screamed for help, but we lived on a large property with no close neighbors, and my voice was swallowed by the wind. Through the window, I could see Gloria and Brittany in the living room, and they were laughing, actually laughing at my suffering like it was the funniest thing they had ever seen. I tried every door, the back entrance, the garage, every window on the first floor, but everything was locked tight. My fingers were turning blue, losing feeling, becoming useless claws that couldn't grip or turn anything. My feet had gone completely numb, and I couldn't tell anymore if I was standing on frozen ground or if my legs had simply stopped sending signals to my brain. The cold was inside me now, working its way through my body toward my core, toward my baby, and I knew with horrible certainty that we were both going to die out here. My family was going to let me freeze to death on the front step, and they were going to sleep peacefully knowing what they had done. That's when I saw the headlights cutting through the darkness. A car was pulling into the driveway, a sleek black Mercedes with tinted windows that reflected the porch light. I didn't know who it was, didn't care, just stumbled toward the car with the last of my strength, hoping whoever was inside would help me before it was too late. The car door opened, and a man stepped out wearing a suit that probably cost more than I used to make in 6 months. He was tall with dark hair touched with gray at the temples, sharp features that spoke of authority and wealth, and eyes that widened in shock when they landed on me. This was Grayson Blake, though I didn't know his name yet. Didn't know he was a billionaire tech mogul worth more money than my father could dream of. Didn't know he was supposed to meet Kenneth about a potential business partnership. All I knew was that he took one look at me, collapsed against his car, pregnant and bleeding and freezing, and he didn't hesitate for even a second. Grayson rushed to my side faster than I would have thought possible for someone wearing expensive Italian leather shoes. He stripped off his coat, a long black cashmere that probably cost thousands of dollars, and wrapped it around my shoulders without a word. His hands touched my arms, and I heard him curse under his breath at how cold my skin was, like touching ice. He asked my name, and I tried to answer, but my teeth were chattering so hard I could barely form words. All I managed was Cassidy before another wave of pain rolled through my abdomen and I doubled over, feeling more blood gush out of me. His expression shifted from concern to fury in an instant, and he looked at the house with the kind of rage that makes powerful men dangerous. He helped me stand, practically carrying me because my legs wouldn't support my weight anymore, and he pounded on the door with a fist that made the wood shake in its frame. He demanded it be opened, his voice carrying the kind of authority that expected immediate obedience. The door opened, and Gloria stood there with her fake smile firmly in place, the same smile she used on everyone who might be useful to her. She pretended to be shocked and concerned, gasping about how I was outside, saying she had no idea how I had gotten locked out, implying with every word that this was somehow my fault. She tried to spin a story about me running outside in a fit of hysteria after causing a scene at dinner, about how the family had tried to stop me but I was out of control, about how pregnancy had made me unstable and unpredictable. But Grayson wasn't buying any of it. His eyes moved from Gloria to the door, and I saw him notice what I had been too panicked to register. The lock was the kind that could only be engaged from inside, the deadbolt that required a key from the exterior. There was no way I could have locked myself out. His gaze traveled past Gloria into the house, where he could see Brittany and Jackson trying to hide their amusement, see Kenneth standing in the background with his arms crossed like this was all a minor inconvenience. Most damningly, he looked down and saw the trail of blood leading from inside the house, across the threshold, and out to where I had been standing. His jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping in his cheek, and when he looked back at Gloria, his expression could have frozen water. Grayson didn't argue with them or try to get them to admit the truth. He simply scooped me up in his arms like I weighed nothing, cradling me against his chest while pulling out his phone with his free hand. I heard him calling an ambulance, giving the address in a voice that was controlled and professional despite the situation, then adding that police should probably come as well for a possible domestic violence case. Gloria's fake smile slipped, replaced by genuine panic, and she reached out like she was going to try to stop him. Kenneth stepped forward then, probably trying to salvage his business relationship with this wealthy stranger, suggesting they discuss this inside like reasonable adults, talking about misunderstandings and family matters that didn't concern outsiders. Grayson cut him off with words that were colder than the air around us. He said he was taking me to the hospital immediately because, unlike my family, he actually cared if a pregnant woman died. He told Kenneth they would never discuss business together. Not now, not ever, because he didn't do deals with people who locked their pregnant daughters outside in freezing temperatures. He looked at Gloria and said that everything he had witnessed tonight would be reported to the authorities, and if anything happened to me or my baby, he would personally ensure that criminal charges were filed. Gloria tried to intervene, stepping forward with her hands raised in a placating gesture, saying he didn't understand the situation, that I wasn't his concern, that this was a family matter. His response shut her down completely. He said a pregnant woman bleeding in 4-degree weather was everyone's concern, apparently everyone's except her own family's. And then he turned and carried me toward his car. The drive to the hospital felt both endless and instantaneous. Grayson kept talking to me the entire time, asking me questions to keep me conscious. His voice steady and calm even though I could see the speedometer pushing past 80 on residential streets. He asked my name again, and this time I managed to tell him. He asked how old I was, and I said 28. He asked about my baby, and I whispered that I was 7 months along, that this was my first pregnancy, that I couldn't feel her moving anymore and I was so scared. He told me to keep talking, to stay with him, that we were almost there. I kept apologizing, saying I didn't want to be a burden, that I would pay him back for his coat because I had gotten blood on it. My words came out slurred and confused, my brain starting to shut down from shock and cold. He told me to stop apologizing, that I hadn't done anything wrong, that the people who should be apologizing were the ones who had just tried to kill me. We pulled up to the emergency room entrance, and Grayson was out of the car before it fully stopped, yelling for help. Doctors and nurses rushed out with a gurney, lifting me onto it, cutting away my blood-soaked dress to assess the damage. I heard medical terms I didn't understand, words like placental abruption and hypovolemic shock, saw the concerned looks passing between the staff. Someone asked who the father was, and before I could explain that he wasn't, Grayson said he was staying until my family arrived. A nurse gently told him that my family had just been called and were on their way, and I saw his expression darken. He said my family was the reason I was here, that they were not allowed anywhere near me, and he would pay for private security if necessary to keep them out. The last thing I saw before they wheeled me towards surgery was Grayson standing in the emergency room with blood on his shirt and coat, my blood, pulling out his phone to make calls I couldn't hear. The surgery took 3 hours, according to what I was told later. The doctors had to perform an emergency procedure to stop the bleeding and save my baby, my little girl who was fighting just as hard as I was to survive. The placental abruption had been caused by a combination of extreme stress and exposure to cold, exactly the kind of complications that should have been treated immediately instead of being dismissed as drama. I could have died. My baby could have died. We both almost did, because my family decided their pride and their secrets were more valuable than our lives. When I woke up in a hospital bed, groggy from anesthesia and pain medication, the first thing I saw was Grayson Blake sitting in the chair beside me. He hadn't left. This stranger who owed me nothing, who had every reason to drop me off and walk away from the mess that was my life, had stayed through the entire surgery and was now watching over me while I slept. When he saw my eyes open, his expression shifted from worry to relief, and I saw him take a deep breath like he had been holding it for hours. He told me my baby was alive, that she was stable, that the doctors had managed to save us both. I started crying. Deep sobs that shook my whole body, because for the first time in so long, someone had actually helped me instead of hurting me. The doctors told me I was extraordinarily lucky to be alive. The combination of blood loss, hypothermia, and stress should have killed both me and my baby, and the fact that we survived was close to miraculous. I had been minutes away from complete organ failure when Grayson brought me into the emergency room, my core temperature dangerously low, my blood pressure barely registering. My baby girl, who I had started calling Lily in my mind even though she wasn't born yet, had shown incredible resilience despite the trauma. The doctors wanted to keep me in the hospital for at least a week to monitor both of us, to make sure there were no lasting complications from what they delicately called my exposure incident. Grayson visited every single day, usually bringing food that was infinitely better than hospital meals, sometimes just sitting quietly reading while I slept. On the 3rd day, when I was finally coherent enough to have a real conversation, he revealed something that shocked me. He had paid for all my medical expenses, every single bill, because he had checked and found out I had no insurance since Jackson had removed me from his policy after I filed for divorce. The amount must have been astronomical. Tens of thousands of dollars for the emergency surgery and week-long hospital stay, but Grayson brushed it off like it was nothing. When I tried to protest, tried to tell him I would find a way to pay him back, he looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read and asked if we could talk about something more important. He told me he had hired a private investigator named Petra, one of the best in the business, to look into my family with my permission. I was hesitant at first, worried about what it would cost, and whether I wanted to know the full extent of their betrayal, but Grayson convinced me that knowledge was power, and I needed every weapon I could get. What Petra uncovered over 3 days of digging was so much worse than I had imagined. Gloria had been embezzling from Kenneth's business for years, funneling money into offshore accounts through fake vendor contracts and inflated expense reports. She had stolen over $2 million across 8 years, and Kenneth had never noticed because he trusted her completely with the company finances. Brittany had a documented history of sabotaging my relationships and opportunities, including emails where she posed as me to send offensive messages to my college professors and potential employers. Jackson's gambling debts were extensive, over $300,000 owed to some very dangerous people, and he had specifically targeted me for marriage because he thought my father's wealth would solve his problems. The most damaging revelation was the life insurance policy. 6 months before I got pregnant, Jackson and Brittany had taken out a $3 million life insurance policy on me without my knowledge, using forged signatures and falsified documents. The payout required my death to look accidental or natural, and the policy specifically covered death during pregnancy or childbirth. When Petra showed me the paperwork, complete with text messages between Jackson and Brittany discussing how to make my death look like a tragic accident, I felt physically sick. They hadn't just been cruel to me. They had been actively planning to murder me and make it look like a pregnancy complication. Being locked outside in 4-degree weather while bleeding wasn't just abuse, it was attempted murder, and they had almost succeeded. Grayson offered me a place to stay in one of his properties, a a guest house on his estate that was fully furnished and private. I was deeply suspicious at first, waiting for him to reveal what he wanted in exchange for all this help, because in my experience, nobody did anything without expecting something in return. But when I asked him directly what he wanted from me, his answer was so simple and honest that I almost didn't believe it. He told me about his younger sister, Emma, who had been in an abusive relationship years ago. She had called him one night asking for help, but he was in the middle of a business deal overseas and told her he would come get her when he got back in a few days. She died that night, killed by her boyfriend, and Grayson had spent every day since wishing he had dropped everything and saved her when he had the chance. He couldn't save Emma, but he could help me, and that was enough reason for him. The Turner family didn't take my disappearance quietly. Kenneth showed up at the hospital the day after the surgery with Gloria by his side, both of them playing the role of concerned family. They demanded to see me, putting on a performance for the hospital staff about how worried they were, how there had been a terrible misunderstanding, how they just wanted to make sure I was recovering. Hospital security prevented them from entering my room based on instructions Grayson had left with the administration and his lawyer, but Kenneth threatened legal action. He claimed Grayson was kidnapping his daughter, that I was being held against my will, that this was all some scheme to extort money from the family. Grayson's lawyer shut that argument down immediately by providing the hospital security footage from the neighbor's camera that showed Gloria dragging me outside and locking the door, along with the police report that had been filed about the incident. Gloria's response to being blocked from the hospital was to launch a comprehensive smear campaign designed to destroy what little reputation I had left. She called everyone in their social circle, from business associates to country club members to distant family friends, and told them a carefully crafted story about her ungrateful stepdaughter who had mental health issues. She claimed I had seduced a wealthy older man, Grayson, while still married and pregnant with another man's baby. She said I had abandoned my family after they had taken me in during my time of need, that I was trying to trap Grayson with my pregnancy, that I was unstable and manipulative. She even posted on social media, writing long, heartfelt messages about her pain over losing her stepdaughter to mental illness and bad influences, carefully wording everything to sound sympathetic while actually destroying my character. Many people believed her because Gloria had spent years building her image as a devoted stepmother and pillar of the community. She had always been careful to abuse me only in private, to present a perfect family image in public, so when she claimed I was the problem, people had no reason to doubt her. I started receiving messages from people I barely knew, strangers telling me I was a homewrecker and a gold digger, that I should be ashamed of myself for treating my family so poorly. Some messages were much worse, explicit and threatening, calling me names I won't repeat and suggesting I deserved what I got. I made the mistake of reading the comments on Gloria's social media posts, and they made me physically ill. Hundreds of people who knew nothing about the truth were calling for my head, saying I should have my baby taken away, that someone like me didn't deserve to be a mother. The fourth major attack came through the legal system when Jackson filed for full custody of my unborn baby. His lawyer presented a case that painted me as an unfit mother who actively endangered her child, using the incident outside as evidence but twisting it to make it look like I had run out on my own during a mental breakdown. Brittany provided a sworn statement supporting Jackson's version of events, claiming she had tried to stop me from going outside, but I had been hysterical and uncontrollable. Kenneth provided a character witness statement against his own daughter, saying I had always been troubled and unstable, that he feared for his grandchild's safety in my care. The custody hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks after my due date, which meant I would have to defend my right to keep my baby while still recovering from childbirth. Jackson's lawyer made it clear they were seeking full custody with 0 visitation rights for me, essentially trying to erase me from my own child's life completely. I nearly gave up in that hospital room. The weight of everything, the betrayal and abuse, and now the legal battle, felt like too much to survive. I told Grayson through tears that maybe I should just stop fighting, that maybe everyone was right and I wasn't strong enough or good enough to be a mother. I said maybe my baby would be better off without me, that I was poison, and everything I touched turned to pain. For the first time since I met him, Grayson got angry with me. Not cruel or mean, but frustrated in a way that came from caring. He told me that giving up was exactly what they wanted, that Gloria and Jackson and everyone else who hurt me were counting on me to believe I was worthless because it made me easier to control. He said my baby needed a mother who would fight for her, not a mother who surrendered to abusers. His words were harsh but necessary, and they sparked something in me that I thought had died in the snow outside my father's house. A nurse named Dorothy, who had been caring for me throughout my hospital stay, recognized what she was seeing. She had worked in abuse recovery for years before moving to labor and delivery, and she knew the signs of long-term psychological abuse as well as physical trauma. Dorothy connected me with a therapist named Dr. Sarah Chen, who specialized in family trauma and narcissistic abuse. And for the first time in my life, I started to understand what had been done to me. I learned about gaslighting and scapegoating, about how abusive family systems create roles that are almost impossible to escape, about how children of narcissists are trained from birth to accept blame for things that aren't their fault. Dr. Chen helped me see that I wasn't crazy, or broken, or worthless. I was traumatized, and there was a profound difference between those two things. After a week in the hospital, I was discharged with strict orders to rest and avoid stress, which would have been funny if it wasn't so impossible given my situation. Grayson drove me to his estate, a sprawling property in the countryside that looked like something out of a magazine, and showed me to the guest house where I would be staying. It was bigger and nicer than anywhere I had ever lived, with 2 bedrooms, a full kitchen, and windows that overlooked gardens that probably cost more to maintain than most people's annual salary. For the first time in months, I felt safe. The property had security gates and cameras, staff who had been informed not to let anyone from the Turner family onto the grounds, and most importantly, space between me and the people who wanted to destroy me. I was still waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Grayson to reveal what he really wanted from me. In my experience, help always came with strings attached, with expectations and demands, and eventual disappointment when I couldn't meet them. But Grayson maintained careful boundaries, checking in on me daily but never imposing, making sure I had everything I needed but respecting my space. He didn't try to touch me or make advances or even hint that he expected anything romantic or physical in exchange for his help. He treated me like a human being, with dignity and respect, and I didn't know how to process that kind of treatment because it was so foreign to everything I had experienced. Petra, the investigator Grayson had hired, continued to dig deeper into my family's activities, and what she found was comprehensive enough to fill a legal brief. She obtained security footage from a neighbor's camera that had a partial view of the Turner house entrance, and it clearly showed Gloria dragging me outside and Brittany helping to push me through the door before it locked. The footage had timestamps and was completely unaltered, which meant it could hold up in court. Petra also accessed bank records through legal channels that proved Gloria had been systematically stealing from Kenneth's business for 8 years, creating fake vendor accounts and approval documents that Kenneth had signed without reading. The total amount stolen was actually closer to $3 million, and the evidence was ironclad. But perhaps most damning were the text messages Petra recovered from Jackson's phone records through a subpoena. The messages between Jackson and Brittany went back even further than I had known, starting almost a year before Jackson and I met. They had planned the entire relationship, with Brittany identifying me as a target because of my father's wealth and Jackson playing the role of charming suitor to perfection. The messages talked about how to isolate me from friends, how to make me dependent, how to get me pregnant so I would be trapped. There were messages discussing the life insurance policy, with Jackson writing that $3 million would solve all his gambling debts and leave plenty left over for them to start their life together. Most chillingly, there were messages from the night I was locked outside, with Brittany writing that the cold weather was perfect, and Jackson responding that they should give it at least an hour before checking to make sure the job was done. Grayson's business partner and friend, a man named Roger Bennett who had worked with Kenneth for years, reached out privately to offer his help. Roger had suspected Gloria's schemes for a long time, but had never been able to prove anything or convince Kenneth to look closer at the finances. He had watched Gloria systematically destroy Kenneth's relationship with me, isolating Kenneth from his daughter through lies and manipulation, and he felt guilty for not intervening sooner. Roger provided insider information about Gloria's next moves, including her plan to have Kenneth change his will to completely disinherit me and leave everything to Gloria and Brittany. She wanted to ensure that even if I survived and won the custody battle, I would have nothing, no inheritance, and no family support to fall back on. I started seeing Dr. Chen twice a week for therapy sessions that were more intense and revealing than anything I had ever experienced. She helped me understand that I had been raised in a traumatic environment, even before Gloria entered my life, that losing my mother at 9 years old had left me vulnerable and desperate for family connection, and that Gloria had exploited that vulnerability with surgical precision. We talked about the concept of the family scapegoat, the person who gets blamed for everything that goes wrong so that the rest of the family doesn't have to face their own issues. That was the role I had been forced into, and I had accepted it because I didn't know there was any other option. For the first time, I started to believe that maybe I wasn't the problem, that maybe the people who hurt me were responsible for their own actions and I wasn't obligated to accept their abuse. Through therapy, I began documenting everything I could remember about the years of abuse for the custody case. Dr. Chen helped me write a detailed timeline of incidents, from the subtle manipulations when I was 12 to the attempted murder when I was 28. We included the forged Yale letter accusation, the financial isolation during my marriage, the physical assaults disguised as accidents, the time Gloria pushed me downstairs when I was 6 months pregnant and then claimed I had tripped. Every memory was painful to revisit, but Dr. Chen explained that this documentation would be crucial in court, that it showed a pattern of behavior rather than isolated incidents. The fifth major attack came just when I was starting to feel like maybe I could win this fight. Gloria hired a private investigator to follow me and Grayson, looking for any evidence she could use against me in the custody case. The investigator took photos of us together, deliberately framing them to look intimate even when we were just talking or walking. There was a photo of Grayson putting his hand on my shoulder in comfort that was cropped and angled to look like an embrace. There was a photo of us having dinner on the patio of the guest house that implied we were living together as a couple. There was even a photo taken through a window of Grayson helping me carry groceries that the investigator claimed showed us acting like a family unit. Gloria leaked these photos to tabloid websites along with a completely fabricated story about the billionaire's pregnant mistress who had abandoned her husband and family to seduce a richer man. The article was full of lies, claiming I had been cheating on Jackson throughout our marriage, that I wasn't sure who the father of my baby was, that I had targeted Grayson specifically for his money and was already pregnant when we met. The headline read exactly as Grayson had warned me it might. Billionaire's pregnant mistress, family claims she abandoned husband. The article painted me as a calculating gold digger who had destroyed my marriage and family relationships in pursuit of a bigger payday, and it went viral within hours. My face was suddenly everywhere, on gossip websites and social media, with thousands of strangers commenting on my character and my choices without knowing anything about the truth. People recognized me when I went to doctor's appointments, whispering and pointing, taking photos on their phones to post online with cruel captions. The comments on the articles were vicious, calling me names that made my stomach turn, saying I deserved to lose my baby, that I was a whore and a manipulator who should be ashamed to show my face in public. Even some of Grayson's business associates reached out to suggest he distance himself from the scandal, warning him that being associated with me was damaging his reputation and could affect his business deals. I felt crushing guilt for dragging Grayson into my nightmare. He had done nothing but help me, and now his name was being dragged through the mud because of his association with me. Jackson's custody case suddenly looked much stronger, because the tabloid articles made me appear to be an adulteress and a liar, exactly the kind of unstable person who shouldn't have custody of a child. I couldn't go anywhere without being judged and condemned by people who believed glorious lies because they were more entertaining than the truth. The stress triggered early labor contractions at 36 weeks, and I was terrified that history would repeat itself, that I would lose my baby because my body couldn't handle the constant assault. I reached my breaking point, sitting in the emergency room for the second time in 2 weeks, hooked up to monitors while doctors tried to stop the contractions and keep my baby inside me for a few more weeks. I looked at Grayson, who had dropped everything to rush to the hospital with me, and I told him I was considering giving up my parental rights. I said maybe the best thing for my baby would be for me to disappear from her life completely, to let Jackson have full custody and start over somewhere far away, where nobody knew my name or my story. I said I couldn't keep dragging her into this war, that she deserved better than a mother who came with so much baggage and chaos. It was my lowest moment, the point where I almost let them win, where I almost believed I was too damaged to deserve my own child. The contractions stopped after several hours of medication and monitoring, and baby Lily decided she wasn't ready to enter the world just yet, despite the chaos surrounding her existence. The doctor sent me home with more strict orders to rest and avoid stress, which everyone in the room knew was impossible but nobody said out loud. Grayson drove me back to the guest house in silence, and I could feel his frustration and worry radiating off him in waves. When we got inside, he finally said what he had been holding back all evening. He told me that giving up my baby to Jackson and Brittany wasn't noble or selfless. It was surrender, and I owed it to my daughter to fight for her, even when fighting felt impossible. His words were harsh but true, and they cracked something open inside me that I had been trying to keep sealed. I broke down completely, sobbing in a way I hadn't let myself since this all began, crying for everything I had lost, and everything I was afraid I would lose. Grayson held me while I fell apart, not saying anything, just being present in a way no one else ever had been. When I finally stopped crying, exhausted and empty, he told me something that changed everything. He said he had fallen in love with me from the moment he found me in the snow, that he knew the timing was terrible and I didn't have to feel the same way, but he needed me to know that I was worth fighting for. Not because of what I could give him or how I could benefit him, but because I was a good person who deserved safety and love and a chance to be happy. I didn't know what to say to that confession, so I just held on to him and let myself believe, just for a moment, that maybe I could have something good in my life after all. For the first time since this nightmare began, I allowed myself to hope that maybe there was a path forward where I didn't just survive but actually lived. We stayed up late that night making a battle plan, calling Grayson's lawyers and Petra to coordinate our strategy for the custody hearing that was now just days away. If they wanted a war, I would give them a war. And this time I had an army behind me instead of fighting alone. The truth about Maya, my supposed childhood friend who had betrayed me, came out during Petra's continued investigation and hit me harder than almost anything else. Maya wasn't just a friend who had been bought off by Gloria. She was Gloria's niece, her sister's daughter, and had been planted in my life deliberately when we were kids, specifically to spy on me and sabotage any friendships or opportunities I developed outside the family. Every time I had lost a friend in high school because of mysterious rumors about me, that had been Maya's work. Every time a job opportunity fell through after a promising interview, Maya had been making phone calls and sending emails in my name. Every relationship I had tried to build before Jackson had been systematically destroyed by Maya creating drama and spreading lies. I realized I had been fighting a rigged game for over 15 years, that my isolation hadn't been accidental but carefully orchestrated to ensure I had no support system outside the family. Kenneth's awakening came slowly and then all at once, like a dam with small cracks that suddenly collapsed. Roger Bennett finally showed Kenneth the evidence of Gloria's embezzlement in a way he couldn't dismiss or ignore, presenting bank statements and forged documents side by side with the actual invoices from vendors. Kenneth initially refused to believe it, defending Gloria and insisting there must be some mistake. But the numbers were undeniable. Nearly $3 million had been funneled out of his business over 8 years, and Gloria's signature was on every fraudulent approval. Roger then showed him security footage from Kenneth's home office that showed Gloria going through his files when he was traveling, photographing documents with her phone, replacing papers in his desk. For the first time in years, Kenneth started to question the narrative Gloria had built about me. He went back through old incidents in his mind with new perspective, reviewing conversations and accusations through a different lens. He pulled up security footage from his house for the night of the business dinner, and saw what he had refused to see before. Gloria dragging me outside while I begged for help, Brittany laughing as she helped push me through the door, the lock clicking into place while I pounded on the wood. He saw himself turn away and walk back to the dining room, dismissing his daughter's cries for help because he trusted his wife more than his own blood. The guilt hit him like a physical blow, and according to Roger, Kenneth locked himself in his office for an entire day after watching that footage. The sixth and final major attack came 2 days before the custody hearing, when Gloria made her most desperate and vicious move. She filed a police report claiming I had stolen family jewelry worth $200,000, producing evidence that Brittany had planted in my old room at their house weeks earlier. The jewelry, a collection of diamond pieces that had belonged to Kenneth's mother, had supposedly gone missing around the time I moved out, and Gloria claimed she had just discovered I had taken them. She presented photographs of the jewelry box hidden in the back of the closet in what used to be my room, implying I had stashed it there, planning to retrieve it later. An arrest warrant was issued for grand larceny, and police arrived at Grayson's property to take me into custody. I was handcuffed in front of baby Lily's nursery that we had just finished preparing, watching all our preparation for the custody hearing potentially crumble around me. Being arrested 2 days before the hearing was exactly what Gloria wanted, because it would make me look guilty and unstable, like a criminal who couldn't be trusted with a child. I was taken to the police station in handcuffs, fingerprinted and photographed, and placed in a holding cell while they processed the charges. The walls of that cell were covered in scratches and graffiti from previous occupants, and I sat on the metal bench thinking this was it. This was the moment where I lost everything despite all our planning and evidence. I was held for 6 hours before Grayson's lawyer secured my release on bail, but the damage was done. Jackson's lawyer was already filing motions to use my arrest as evidence of criminal behavior and unfitness as a mother. I was released on bail, wearing clothes that smelled like jail, disinfectant, and defeat. The custody hearing was in 36 hours, and now I had a fresh arrest on my record that the judge would see when reviewing my case. Jackson's legal team was painting a picture of me as an unstable criminal who endangered her child and stole from her family, and every lie they told was getting reinforced by new accusations before I could defend against the old ones. I sat in Grayson's car in the police station parking lot and told him I wanted to run away, to disappear to another state or country, and start completely over where my family couldn't find me. I said maybe I should just leave Lily with Jackson because at least she would grow up financially secure, that having a criminal mother would ruin her life before it even started. Grayson's response was to take my face in his hands and look at me with an intensity that made me actually listen to what he was saying. He told me he had fallen in love with me, not because I was perfect or undamaged, but because I kept getting up every time they knocked me down, because I fought for my baby even when it would have been easier to give up, because underneath all the trauma and pain I was one of the strongest people he had ever met. He said we were going to walk into that courtroom in 2 days and expose every single lie, present every piece of evidence, and prove to the judge that I was the victim of a conspiracy, not a criminal or an unfit mother. He promised we would win the custody case and bring Gloria's entire house of cards crashing down around her. For the first time since being arrested, I allowed myself to hope that maybe he was right. That night, Grayson told me he loved me again, but this time he did it while showing me all the evidence Petra had compiled, all the witness statements Roger had collected, all the legal arguments his team had prepared. He loved me enough to fight for me with everything he had, to put his reputation and resources on the line, to stand beside me against my family even though it would have been easier and safer to walk away. I realized that this was what real love looked like, not the conditional affection I had chased my entire life, but unconditional support that didn't waver when things got hard. I told him I loved him too, and I meant it with every broken and healing piece of my heart. The custody hearing took place in a courthouse that smelled like floor polish and fear, with high ceilings that made every whispered conversation echo like accusations. The courtroom was packed beyond what I expected, filled with my father Kenneth, Gloria with her lawyer, Brittany looking nervous for the first time since this all began, Jackson and his legal team, dressed in expensive suits, meant to project stability and success, and even some media representatives who had followed the tabloid story. Grayson sat directly behind me with his legal team, a wall of support I could feel even when I couldn't see him. My hands were shaking so badly I had to sit on them to keep anyone from noticing, and my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Jackson's lawyer went first, presenting a case that painted me as fundamentally unstable and dangerous to my own child. They showed the judge the tabloid photos that made it look like Grayson and I were having an affair, presented the recent arrest for theft as evidence of criminal behavior, and displayed my history of what they called erratic actions, including the incident where I supposedly ran outside during a mental breakdown. They brought up my mother's death when I was 9 and suggested I had never properly dealt with that trauma, implying I was mentally fragile and likely to harm my child through neglect or worse. Jackson testified with practiced sadness, saying he had tried to make our marriage work, but I had become increasingly paranoid and accusatory, that I had driven him away with my jealousy and instability, that he feared for his daughter's safety if she was left in my care unsupervised. Gloria took the stand next, and her performance was Oscar-worthy in its calculated emotion. She cried real tears while testifying about how she had tried to help me after my marriage fell apart, how she had welcomed me back into their home despite my history of causing problems, how she had watched me spiral into what she believed was a mental health crisis. She claimed the night I was locked outside had been a tragic misunderstanding, that I had run out in a fit of hysteria after causing a scene at an important dinner, that the family had tried to stop me but I was beyond reasoning with. She said when they finally got the door open, I was gone, and they assumed I had called a friend for help. She presented herself as a concerned stepmother who had done everything possible to support a troubled stepdaughter, only to be repaid with false accusations and stolen property. Brittany's testimony was shorter, but equally damaging. She testified that I had always been jealous of her, that I couldn't accept having to share my father's attention, that I had made her life miserable with cruel comments and sabotage. She claimed with wide, innocent eyes that Jackson had come to her for comfort after I had pushed him away, that their relationship had developed naturally from friendship into something more, that she felt terrible about it but couldn't help her feelings. She said I had threatened her multiple times, told her I would make her pay for stealing my husband, and she was genuinely afraid of what I might do if given custody of a baby I could use as a weapon against the family. Every word out of her mouth was a lie, but she delivered them with such conviction that I could see doubt creeping into the judge's expression. Then it was our turn, and Grayson's legal team came out swinging with evidence that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. They presented the security footage from the neighbor's camera that clearly showed Gloria dragging me outside and Brittany helping to push me through the door, with timestamps that proved they had left me locked out for over 20 minutes before Grayson arrived. They showed the judge my hospital records documenting hypothermia, significant blood loss, and placental abruption directly caused by exposure to extreme cold and stress. They presented bank records proving Gloria had embezzled nearly $3 million from Kenneth's business over 8 years, complete with forged signatures and fake vendor invoices. They showed text messages between Jackson and Brittany planning their affair and discussing how to isolate and control me, messages that dated back to before Jackson and I were even married. The courtroom was dead silent as the judge reviewed page after page of evidence that destroyed every lie the other side had presented. Gloria's lawyer tried to object, claiming some of the evidence had been obtained improperly, but Grayson's team had documentation proving every piece had been acquired through legal channels with proper subpoenas and warrants. They presented my medical records from the past year, showing multiple injuries that I had attributed to accidents but that doctors had noted were consistent with physical abuse. They showed emails from Maya to Gloria discussing their plans to sabotage my friendships and job opportunities, proving the conspiracy had been ongoing for over 15 years. They presented the life insurance policy that Jackson and Brittany had taken out on me with forged signatures, along with text messages discussing how $3 million would solve all their problems. The surprise witness that no one saw coming was Roger Bennett, Kenneth's longtime business partner, who took the stand and testified about Gloria's systematic manipulation of Kenneth over the years. Roger provided documentation of Gloria's schemes dating back to when she first entered the family, showing that she had researched Kenneth extensively before their supposedly chance meeting at a charity event. He revealed that Gloria had a history of targeting and marrying wealthy widowers, that Kenneth was actually her third husband, and the previous two had died under suspicious circumstances, leaving her as their sole beneficiary. He showed that Gloria had been planning to have Kenneth change his will to disinherit me completely and leave everything to her and Brittany, and he had the draft documents to prove it. The absolute bombshell that made several people in the courtroom gasp out loud came when Petra presented evidence that Jackson and Brittany had taken out a $3 million life insurance policy on me 6 months before I got pregnant. The policy specifically covered death during pregnancy or childbirth, and the payout required my death to appear accidental or natural. Petra then displayed text messages recovered from both their phones discussing how the cold weather on the night of the dinner was perfect timing, how they should wait at least an hour before checking on me to make sure the exposure did its job, how they would split the insurance money and finally be free to live the life they wanted. This wasn't just abuse or neglect or even attempted murder through deliberate indifference. This was premeditated conspiracy to commit murder for financial gain, and the evidence was irrefutable. Kenneth Turner took the stand next, and the man I saw was broken in a way I had never witnessed before. His face was gray, his hands trembled, and when he spoke, his voice cracked with genuine emotion that couldn't be faked. He admitted that he had failed me as a father, that he had allowed Gloria to manipulate him into believing lies about his own daughter, that he had chosen his wife's word over his child's welfare time and time again. He testified about how Gloria had isolated him from me systematically over the years, creating situations where I looked bad and she looked good, poisoning his perception until he couldn't see the truth, even when it was directly in front of him. He revealed that he had reviewed years of security footage from his home after Roger confronted him, and he had seen Gloria pushing me, Brittany destroying my belongings, Maya going through my room to plant evidence. He begged the court to give me custody of my baby and to allow him the chance to try to rebuild our relationship, though he acknowledged he didn't deserve forgiveness for abandoning me when I needed him most. During a courtroom recess, while everyone was supposed to be taking a break, Gloria made her final desperate move. She cornered me in the courthouse bathroom with her mask completely dropped, showing the rage and hatred that she had been hiding for years. She grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise and threatened to harm baby Lily if I didn't drop the custody case immediately, said she would find a way to get to my daughter no matter what the court decided, that I would spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder wondering when she would strike. She promised to make my life a living hell, to destroy any chance I had at happiness, to ensure I paid for exposing her secrets and ruining her plans. What Gloria didn't know was that Dorothy, the nurse who had helped me in the hospital and had become a friend, was in one of the bathroom stalls and heard every word. Dorothy quietly pulled out her phone and recorded the entire threat, capturing Gloria's voice clearly as she described exactly how she would hurt an infant to punish me for daring to fight back. When we returned to the courtroom, Dorothy approached the judge and requested to be heard as a witness. She played the recording for the entire courtroom, and Gloria's voice filled the space with threats so vicious and specific that even her own lawyer looked horrified. You could hear the hatred in every word, the absolute conviction that she had the right to hurt and destroy anyone who got in her way. The recording was damning not just for the content but for the tone, the complete lack of remorse or humanity, the casual way she discussed harming a baby as if it was nothing more than an inconvenient chore. The judge's verdict came after only 20 minutes of deliberation, which told me everything I needed to know about how clear-cut the evidence had been. I was awarded full custody of Lily with no restrictions or conditions. Jackson was ordered to pay child support but granted only supervised visitation at my discretion, meaning I could refuse to allow visits if I felt they were harmful to my daughter. The judge referred Gloria's threats, the embezzlement evidence, and the life insurance scheme to criminal prosecutors for immediate investigation and potential charges of fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and making terroristic threats. Restraining orders were issued against Gloria, Brittany, and Jackson, prohibiting them from coming within 500 feet of me or my daughter. Kenneth was allowed supervised visitation contingent on him attending family therapy with me and demonstrating genuine change over time. And the judge made it clear that this was a privilege that could be revoked if he failed to follow through. Gloria was arrested in the courtroom immediately after the judge's ruling, handcuffed by bailiffs, while she screamed about how this was all a misunderstanding, how I had manipulated everyone, how she was the real victim in this situation. She looked at me with pure hatred as they led her away, and I felt nothing but relief that she would finally face consequences for the damage she had caused. Brittany fled the courthouse in tears, covering her face from the media cameras that had been tipped off about the dramatic case, her carefully constructed image of the sweet, innocent daughter crumbling in real time. Jackson tried to approach me after the hearing to say something, probably trying to salvage some relationship with his daughter even after everything that had been exposed, but Grayson and courthouse security blocked him before he could get close. Kenneth approached me carefully, tears streaming down his face, and tried to apologize. He said he was sorry over and over, that he had been blind and stupid and cruel, that he would spend the rest of his life trying to make it up to me if I would just give him a chance. I looked at the man who was supposed to protect me and had instead chosen to believe the worst about me for years, and I felt a complicated mixture of anger and grief and tentative hope. I told him I wasn't ready to forgive him yet, that trust wasn't rebuilt in a day or even a year, but I wasn't turning him away completely either. I said if he was serious about change, he needed to prove it through actions over time, not just words in a courtroom when he had finally been forced to see the truth. He nodded and said he understood, that he would do whatever it took for as long as it took, and I saw genuine remorse in his eyes that I chose to believe was real. 3 months after the custody hearing, I was standing in my own apartment for the first time in my adult life, a space that belonged to me alone, with no one to tell me how to decorate it or who I could invite over. The apartment wasn't huge or fancy, but it was mine, purchased with money from a settlement Kenneth had paid me for the years of abuse and the inheritance I was legally entitled to from my mother's estate that Gloria had convinced him to withhold. Baby Lily was sleeping peacefully in her nursery, growing bigger and stronger every day, completely unaware of the battle that had been fought to keep us together. I had started my own event planning business that was already successful beyond my expectations, with clients who valued my creativity and professionalism, with contracts that provided financial security I had never experienced before. I was continuing therapy twice a week with Dr. Chen, learning to set healthy boundaries and recognize manipulation patterns, slowly healing from decades of psychological damage. The criminal consequences for my family came down hard and comprehensive. Gloria was facing multiple felony charges, including embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and making terroristic threats, with prosecutors presenting a case so strong that her lawyer was already negotiating a plea deal to avoid trial. Even with a plea deal, she was looking at a minimum of 15 years in federal prison, with the possibility of much more if the life insurance conspiracy charges resulted in conviction. She was also being investigated by authorities in 2 other states for the suspicious deaths of her previous husbands, cases that had been closed as accidents but were now being reopened with new scrutiny. Brittany had been charged as an accessory to fraud and conspiracy for her role in helping Gloria embezzle money and frame me for theft, plus additional charges related to the fake jewelry theft report that had gotten me arrested. She was facing up to 5 years in prison, and her entire social media following had turned against her once the truth came out about what she had done. Jackson lost his job at the financial firm where he worked after his gambling debts and conspiracy charges became public, and he filed for bankruptcy when his creditors came calling for the $300,000 he owed. His supervised visitation rights with Lily remained technically active, but I had yet to allow a single visit because he had shown no genuine remorse or change in behavior. He was required to pay child support, but since he had no income, the payments were minimal and mostly symbolic. Maya, Gloria's niece who had pretended to be my friend while sabotaging my life for years, was charged with fraud and conspiracy for her role in Gloria's long-term schemes, including forging emails and documents in my name. She had already accepted a plea deal that required her to testify against Gloria and Brittany in exchange for reduced charges, and part of her sentence included a formal apology letter where she admitted everything she had done. I threw the letter away without reading it because nothing she could write would undo the damage or make me trust her again. Kenneth's redemption arc was slow and uncertain, but it was happening. He had divorced Gloria immediately after the custody hearing, cutting all financial and emotional ties to the woman who had manipulated him for years. He was working with forensic accountants to recover the embezzled funds from Gloria's hidden accounts, and every dollar recovered was going into a trust fund for Lily that Gloria couldn't touch. He had started attending individual therapy to understand how he had been manipulated and to address his own failures as a father, and he was showing up consistently for the court-mandated family therapy sessions with me, even when they were uncomfortable and confrontational. He had written me a letter every single day for 3 months, not expecting responses, but using the writing as a way to process his guilt and demonstrate his commitment to change. The letters talked about memories from before my mother died, about mistakes he made after Gloria entered his life, about what he was learning in therapy, about narcissistic abuse and enabling behavior. I read every letter, and while I wasn't ready to fully trust him again, I was willing to see if his actions would match his words over time. Roger Bennett had become an unexpected father figure in my life, filling a role that Kenneth had abandoned years ago. He helped mentor me in business, connecting me with clients and teaching me how to navigate the corporate event planning world. He introduced me to his wife Margaret, who welcomed me warmly and treated me like the daughter they had never had. Roger apologized constantly for not acting sooner to protect me from Gloria, and I forgave him because I understood how skilled manipulators can make good people doubt their own instincts. He was proving through daily actions that he cared about my well-being, and that consistency meant more to me than any words could. Dorothy, the nurse who had recognized the signs of abuse and connected me with resources, had become one of my closest friends. She visited at least once a week, bringing meals when I was too exhausted to cook, holding Lily while I showered or caught up on work, listening when I needed to talk through my complicated feelings about everything that had happened. She was like a grandmother figure to Lily, gentle and patient and full of unconditional love. She represented the family I had chosen for myself rather than the one I was born into, and that choice felt powerful and healing. Grayson and my relationship had developed carefully over the 3 months since the custody hearing, built on a foundation of friendship and mutual respect, rather than rushed into because of trauma or gratitude. He never pressured me to move faster than I was ready for, understanding that I needed time to heal and learn what healthy love looked like before I could fully trust anyone romantically. We started as friends who genuinely enjoyed each other's company, then became partners in every sense of the word, equal and supportive without the power imbalances that had defined all my previous relationships. Grayson loved Lily as if she were his own daughter, showing up for every pediatrician appointment and midnight feeding, reading her stories even though she was too young to understand, building a relationship with her that had nothing to do with biology and everything to do with choice and commitment. We weren't rushing toward marriage or making grand declarations about forever, but we were building something real and lasting that felt more solid than anything I had ever experienced. The transformation I had undergone over the past few months was so profound that sometimes I barely recognized myself. I was no longer the broken woman pounding on a locked door in the freezing cold, begging for help from people who wanted me dead. I had become strong, not in spite of what happened to me, but because I chose to survive it and fight back. I learned to recognize manipulation and gaslighting, to spot red flags in behavior patterns, to trust my own instincts instead of allowing others to define my reality. I built a chosen family of people who genuinely cared for me and proved it through consistent actions rather than empty promises. I was teaching Lily through my example that strength meant standing up for yourself even when it was hard, that family was about love and support rather than blood relation, that she would never have to accept abuse or mistreatment from anyone. The final scene of this chapter of my life took place at Lily's first birthday party, exactly 1 year after that terrible night when I almost died. The guest list was small but meaningful, including Grayson, Roger, and Margaret, Dorothy, Dr. Chen, who had become more friend than therapist, a few colleagues from my new business who had become genuine friends, and Kenneth, who had earned his invitation through a year of consistent effort and therapy. Notably absent were Gloria, still in jail awaiting trial, Brittany, facing her own legal consequences and banned by restraining order, Jackson, who had made no effort to be part of Lily's life beyond minimum child support payments, and Maya, who I would never allow near my daughter. The decorations were colorful and cheerful. The cake was homemade by Margaret, and Lily was dressed in a little pink outfit that made her look like the princess she was. I made a speech while everyone gathered around, thanking the people who had fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself, who had stood beside me when it would have been easier to walk away, who had shown me what real family looked like. I looked at Lily playing with her birthday cake and promised out loud that my daughter would never experience what I did, that she would grow up knowing her worth wasn't determined by other people's opinions, that she would always have people who chose to love her unconditionally. Grayson took my hand during the speech, and I didn't pull away or doubt his intentions because I had learned that not everyone who gets close will hurt me. For the first time in my entire life, I felt completely and genuinely safe, surrounded by people who saw my value and treated me accordingly. I want to share with you what I learned through all of this because maybe someone watching needs to hear it. Surviving abuse doesn't make you broken. It makes you a survivor, and those are two fundamentally different things. Family isn't always the people you share blood with. Sometimes it's the people who show up when your blood relatives lock you out in the cold and leave you to die. The people who truly love you will prove it through actions, not just words, through consistency over time rather than grand gestures that fade. It's never too late to choose yourself and build the life you deserve, even when everyone around you says you don't deserve anything good. Setting boundaries isn't cruel or selfish, it's survival, and you don't owe your abusers access to your life just because they're related to you. Forgiveness is possible, but it must be earned through genuine change and consistent effort, not demanded as something you're obligated to give. The greatest revenge against people who tried to destroy you isn't hurting them back or proving them wrong. It's building a beautiful life they can't touch and finding happiness they can't take away. When I think back to standing outside my father's house in 4-degree weather, 7 months pregnant and bleeding, genuinely believing I was going to die in the snow, I never could have imagined that night would be the beginning of my real life. Sometimes you have to lose everything to realize you deserve better than what you've been accepting. Sometimes the worst moment of your life is actually the doorway to your freedom, the point where you finally stop accepting crumbs and start demanding the full meal. I wouldn't wish what I went through on anyone, but I'm grateful for who it forced me to become, for the strength I discovered I had when I absolutely needed it. They locked me out in the cold to watch me die, but instead, I learned to live, really live, not just survive. And that's something they can never take from me. Now I want to hear from you because your story matters too. Have you ever had to cut toxic family members out of your life to protect yourself or your children? How did you find the strength to set boundaries with people who were supposed to love you unconditionally? Drop your experiences in the comments below, because sharing our stories helps other people feel less alone in their struggles. If this story resonated with you, or if you know someone who needs to hear that they can survive family betrayal and build something better, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel for more real-life stories about overcoming impossible situations. Share this video with anyone who might need the reminder that they're stronger than they know, and that chosen family is just as valid as blood family. Thank you for watching my story and for being part of this community where we support each other through the hardest moments. I hope wherever you are in your journey, whether you're still fighting or you've already won, you know that you deserve safety and love and respect, and anyone who can't give you those things doesn't deserve access to your life. Stay strong, set those boundaries, and never let anyone convince you that you're asking for too much when all you want is basic human decency. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.